Many thanks to the Data Diva Talks Privacy Podcast sponsor and privacy visionary, Smartbox AI, for sponsoring this episode and also supporting our podcast. Smartbox AI, named British AI Company of the Year, provides cutting edge AI helping privacy and technology experts uniquely master their data request challenges and make it easier to comply with global data protection requirements, FOIA requests, and various U.S. state privacy regulations. Their technology is a game changer for anyone needing to sift through complex data, find data, redact sensitive information. With clients across North America and Europe, and a major partnership with Xerox, Smartbox AI is bringing their data expertise right to your doorstep, offering insights into navigating the complex world of global data laws. And for information about Smartbox AI, visit their website at www.smartbox.ai. Enjoy the show. Personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy Podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. I have a very special guest on the show. It's only taken us about 2 years to get to this point. Her name is Debra Brookes. She is the former Deputy Virtual Currency Chief for Research and Innovation Division of the New York State Department of Financial Services. Welcome.
Hi, Debbie, and thank you for inviting me. I know it's been a long and torturous road to get to this point, but I'm so happy to be here talking to you and your audience today.
Well, thank you so much. Your expertise in this area has really fascinated me. I'm always looking for people who are in those emerging tech spaces as you are. And I would totally love for you to be able to tell your journey into your career because I think it's fascinating.
Well, thank you. My name is Deb Brookes. I hail from the Bronx, New York, but my roots, like my family, are deeply embedded in the Caribbean. I've had over 20 years of legal experience in enforcement and regulatory spaces. The first half of my career, I worked as a federal prosecutor with the U.S. Department of Justice's Antitrust Division, where I investigated and prosecuted white-collar crimes. The later half, until recently, was with the New York State Department of Financial Services. I started at DFS in enforcement, where I brought in over $1 billion in fines, but shifted to cryptocurrency when I was promoted into the position of Deputy Virtual Currency Chief, where I held that role for 3 years. My primary duties at that time was to supervise regulated crypto entities in New York State to ensure that they engaged in safe and sound practices in New York. But most importantly, Debbie, I am a wife, a mother of two, and a black belt in Taekwondo.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You have to tell me your Girl Scout cookie story.
Well, how I got this position, interestingly enough, was from Girl Scout cookies. I am a proud mother of a Girl Scout. And on her behalf, I was selling Girl Scout cookies. So I went to a particular person at that time who was in charge of putting together what we now refer to as the Research and Innovation Group. It was called by a different name. I reached out, I went to this individual who I was friendly with. I asked him, hey, would you like to buy some Girl Scout cookies? And he said yes and bought 10 boxes of cookies. So, of course, he became my favorite customer. So we started talking. We got to know each other. He got to know my past and my bona fides. And he asked me at that time, am I familiar with cryptocurrency? I'm like, yeah, I am, because I joined DFS in 2013. At the time, the superintendent, Ben Lowski, he was really pushing to create a robust cryptocurrency regime in New York and had actually held what he called a Bitcoin hearing in New York, included some keynote speakers. So I had some understanding of it, but that was pretty much it. he lent me a book, which I was trying to remember the name of the book. And of course, I cannot remember it, but I really got into the book. He later invited me to a training on crypto basics. At the time, I was working in the enforcement unit. I was not in that unit. So it was based on that experience that really got me curious about crypto and really was interested in cryptocurrency more so than I was when I first joined GFS. Fast forward in 2020, when, and I'm not sure if you remember, the Twitter hack that took place, where I was asked to join an investigative team because of my investigative background on investigating the Twitter hack, where, just for context, in the summer of 2020, turned out it was just one hacker, but at the time we thought it was more coordinated. This particular hacker was able to gain entry into Twitter by social engineering, purporting to be a Twitter employee, then used that access to backdoor and not only attempted to sell certain key accounts, but more importantly, was able to gain access to the blue check marks, which at that time were more prominent as it is today. And he took over certain accounts like President Obama, Biden. We actually, interestingly enough, took over the account of a dead rapper called XXXTentacion, if you remember him, and was basically asking for, if you give me money or give me Bitcoin, I'll double your money. And he was successful in obtaining about over $100,000 worth of Bitcoin at that time, probably worth more today since the price of Bitcoin has shot up. When I was asked to join the Twitter investigation, I already had the background of cryptocurrency. I joined the group that was at the time headed by Matt Homer, Matt Siegel, and John Blockmacher. We really clicked and got along very well. And they liked my work and liked me so much, they invited me to join Research and Innovation. And as I said, the rest is history.
That's fascinating. I love that story. What don't people understand about cryptocurrency or virtual currency that they probably need to know?
That's a very good question. For me, virtual currency or cryptocurrency, in the word, it can be used interchangeably. It is incredibly complex in the sense that what folks think is complex, in a lot of ways it is. But if you have a background or understanding in traditional finance or fintech, those and other services and technologies, it could, and I have observed this at my time at DFS, it gets folded into the blockchain. So oftentimes, most of the products and services that I've observed are not necessarily new. It's new to the blockchain, but it's more of a copy and paste type of job with some modifications to adopt to the blockchain and existing regulation.
What's happening right now in the world as it relates to things like virtual currency and cryptocurrency that concerns you most?
Well, I think what's really concerning is the lack of a federal regulation. As you know, the framework that we have today is largely unregulated. There is no federal framework. There have been attempts for many years, mostly without success. So you're largely left with the states to take on the burdens. Uh, Thankfully, you have states like New York, who has been leading the charge for approaching the 10-year mark. I believe we're about to approach, well, the regulation has came into effect, I believe, in 2015. So the 10th year anniversary is forthcoming. I think not having a comprehensive federal regulation is problematic. And that has led to a lot of the corruptions that we are seeing in real time on a continuous basis. And I'll just make this example. Yesterday, as you know, Sam Bankman-Fried was sentenced to 25 years in jail. And that was because he was the founder of a company called FTX that claimed to have all these controls in place. It turned out he had virtually no controls in place to ensure capital adequacy, to ensure that consumers were protected, to ensure that FTX was running in a safe and sound environment. And that's always was a concern of mine when I was a former regulator, that our licensees were conducting themselves in safe and sound environments. You have someone like FTX, which were completely not engaged in safe and sound practices, but purported and presented themselves to the world that they were. So you have this unregulated market run by entities who, if they're not in New York or in California or other states that have comprehensive crypto programs, you run the risk of fraud of that magnitude, institutions who are really attempting to do wrong or really attempting to do bad work, whether it's through a Ponzi scheme or traditional frauds that we all know and are not thrilled about. But for me, that lack of a comprehensive federal program, I think, is troubling. New York being one of the primary leaders in the United States on crypto regulation is very good. But I've always said this, my coworkers and even those outside, this is my personal view, that we always had, I call it the 49 and 1 problem. The laws in New York really only apply to New York and does not apply technically outside New York. So if companies could park shop in New Jersey and just kind of rub their noses at New York, by saying, hey, we're not in New York, we're across the river, and we're not regulated by you, so leave us alone.
I want your thoughts about anonymity. I've heard this from two different sides of the fence. One is, I think, a lot of times when people think about cryptocurrency, they think about criminal activity because it's hard, like you say, because there's no federal regulation. There isn't any strong way to really track people who are using it for a bad purpose. But then on the flip side, I think, or I've seen people try to use blockchain technology and cryptocurrency as a way to identify people, to make them identifiable. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, in a way, when Satoshi Nakamura, who is the founder, if you will, of Bitcoin and the Bitcoin blockchain, posted his papers back in 2008, I believe, the focus was to have some sense of independence from the government, because during that time period, as you recall, that back in 2008, we just had the implosion of Lehman Brothers and other prominent financial companies. And this was a way for people to have trust in the institution of finance without relying on government primary source of funding. Back in 2009, it was more pseudonymous, where if you look at the transaction history, you would see the transaction history, but the person's name was not part of that transaction, just had a series of letters and numbers that we call hashtags. So that really was the anonymous part, that you could not trace the transactions to an individual. Of course, with agencies and government really stamping and clamping down on ensuring that they can identify the person who is part of that transaction, you do have some more transparency that was probably not intended by Satoshi when he created or developed this Bitcoin blockchain. Of course, we recognize the reasons for that is to ensure that no bad actors are using the blockchain for illicit means. And in fact, I'm not sure if you remember, there was a hack with Bitfinex some maybe about 5 or so years ago, and the monies was essentially in a wallet that was inactive for many years. And then inexplicably out of the blue, there was some movements in the monies. And even though, again, you don't know who owns that wallet, you don't know where that money is going, with the technology that the government has and the private industry has, they were able to arrest the perpetrators, which was a husband and wife team. So you now can do some reverse engineering, if you will, and identify people, which again, believe, and this is just my own opinion, strays from what Satoshi was trying to accomplish.
What do you think about the future of digital wallets? I think I see people using maybe in the future more of crypto and blockchain together as a way to help in identity and digital identity, especially for maybe people who are unbanked or underbanked to be able to be in digital systems. What do you think?
Digital wallets, as you know, is a very interesting platform where you have the private and public keys to gain access to the wallet. Understand that most hacks are likely to happen with the wallet where a bad actor gains access to the wallet. Or I'm sure you've probably heard of a person had Bitcoin in his computer and he threw it away, the computer away, and now it's worth billions of dollars and it's in a landfill somewhere in Europe. So I think to your question of what I think about the future of digital wallets, I think it really needs to be protected to prevent activities that could infiltrate, whether through bad actors who are social engineering or et cetera. We want to prevent that from happening. I recently read that companies like WorldCoin are focusing on biometric data, like an iris scan, that would allow an added layer of protection, similar to with our phones, where if we want, we can use our fingerprint or our face as a secondary identification system.
Yeah, I think I'm always concerned about biometrics used in that way because, first of all, people's biometrics can change. If you have an ailment, your eye or iris will look different if you are older or younger, if you have an operation. And then I'm always concerned about people's biometric information being in a cauldron of data information that is hackable that other people can use for different purposes. What do you think?
Exactly. I think that's exactly right. And that opinion is not a solo opinion. Recently, Portugal halted the use of biometric data through its orbit devices because they had concerns not only on the vulnerabilities, but really concern about young children information being in that data bucket and subject to vulnerabilities. So it is definitely a challenge that companies are trying to solve for, but particularly in the United States, without a comprehensive framework in place, we're left to the devices of the companies to do right by their customers, which I think is always a challenge for any company.
Yeah. I think that's true. And I think for me, finance has been really the top of the chain in terms of being able to protect people's money, the things they think are valuable, and also protecting people's privacy, making sure they keep private what they want to have private. And then so in this new world where we're having all these digital advances that are outside of more regulated systems, it's just very wild west. What do you think the future holds for things like virtual currency?
You know, that is the $1 trillion question. It's a question that I've been asked, that I have asked, is crypto here to stay? I think the answer is yes, particularly in recent months with EFTs now being introduced into the system, which really driven the price of Bitcoin to record levels. I can't see the price of Bitcoin dropping anytime soon because there's going to be a major, what they call a halving event in mid-April, which I can anticipate seeing the price of Bitcoin and other virtual currencies like Ethereum shoot up. I think for me, as a former regulator, the question I always think of is what is the federal government going to do? And I mean the US government. As I said in the beginning, there is no comprehensive federal framework. And probably not for lack of trying on people's parts. As you're probably aware, President Biden issued an executive order 2 years ago that was pretty comprehensive in its directive, but I haven't heard really much in the way of progress. That doesn't mean it's not happening in the background. That just means I'm not seeing the fruits of that order, at least where I was hoping it would go. The federal government, once it gets involved with a comprehensive framework, that might include the issuance of stablecoins because there are some benefits to the blockchain. It is a lot cleaner. Transactions move faster. The existing transactions with ACH and SWIFT, there are problems. And I don't think anyone will deny that. It's antiquated, it's clunky, it needs a solution. And the blockchain technology is a really efficient solution. So, personally, I don't think blockchain is going away anytime soon. And thinking about the vision and the future of Web3, where I believe blockchain is going to be folded into the web, I just don't see blockchain technology going away because even though we may have concerns, they do have some positives. Now, again, with the federal government, if they get involved in creating its own blockchain and issuing its own coins, that might be a game changer.
I never thought about that. By the government having their own coins. I have heard people trying to virtualize traditional fiat in some ways, but I hadn't really thought about the government having their own blockchain and having their own currency. I thought it was really interesting that places like PayPal, you can actually buy virtual currencies there. And to me, I thought that was pretty unique and game changing, especially for people who don't really understand cryptocurrency but want to participate in it or invest in it. That may be a safe way with a provider who knows you and that you don't have to be concerned about. What do you think?
I don't want to go into a lot of detail about PayPal because PayPal was one of my regulated entities when I was with DFS. What I can say, it does help if you want to engage in buying and selling of virtual currency, but you're scared to do it because you're not really sure how to do it. You just have more questions than answers. A company that you know and have a long-term relationship with, not just PayPal, but any reputable, I'm emphasizing the word reputable company that you feel comfortable doing business with, absolutely, it's definitely going to help. I think the larger question is really focusing on the unbanked, because the unbanked has been a challenge, as you know. They're unbanked for a reason, largely because they may not have access to banks or financial institutions, or they may not just have trust in them. So you have to deal with these twin obstacles, if you will, in convincing people to participate in virtual currency. One way is through the use of their cell phones. Even though you may not have a bank account, many people who are unbanked have cell phones. I can see the leveraging of cell phone usage to allow the expansion and use of virtual currency, particularly if you're trying to send remittance from one country to another, and you don't want to go to, I don't want to say the names, but a company that charges a higher fee than if you just sent it through a company that allows you to send it through blockchain technology versus sending it through traditional means.
Yeah. That question is really fascinating because I think that it can be, especially around the digital identity part. I think that having digital wallets and digital currencies for people who maybe had not traditionally been in banking systems can really help with that identity verification because it's a huge problem, I think, around the world.
Yeah, it's a problem here in America. There are people I'm from New York. Early on in my career at DFS, that was an issue that we had to discuss. How do you approach the unbanked? How do you get them involved? Because having your money, if to use that verbiage, under a mattress gives you safety. But of course, having significant amounts of cash in your home has risk. Somebody may break into your house may burn down. You always have risk associated with no matter where your money is placed, which is why it's important to have controls in place, principally through a regulatory framework, but absent that, through really the reputation of the entity.
Now, you were mentioning your concern about the US not yet having a federal framework around digital virtual currencies. I guess I have a twin concern about the US not having a federal framework around privacy because I think those issues come up a lot. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. As you know, the US does not have a large framework that deals specifically with blockchains. And in fact, when we look at the history of data privacy in the United States, it's really lacking compared to our European counterparts. I was listening to one of your previous podcasters, and I don't recall his name, but I think you're highly regarded in his family, and I believe they call you Auntie. And hopefully that will resonate who that person is.
Yes, yes.
Something that he said really struck at me, which I totally agree. I recognize that European countries truly value their privacy. And it was accused that the US doesn't. And I believe he said words to the effect of, well, the US does value privacy, but not as much as our European counterparts. And that is so true with a lack of a federal comprehensive privacy program. If you look at the history with the enactment of HIPAA, the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, the Children's Online Privacy Act, those are targeting specific industries, leaving us largely exposed and really, I don't want to say at the mercy of the states, but really placing the burdens on the states. And it's unfortunate that many states, New York included, really don't have robust, comprehensive data privacy laws in place. And I checked in preparation for our discussion. I was stunned to see that only 13 states have a comprehensive program. And that is stunning. New York has something, but it needs more, in my opinion. Recognizing DFS in its efforts to really step up when there's really not much out there attempted to put together some type of data privacy update in its regulation under New York's what we call 23 NYC-RR 500 or Part 500 for short, which really focuses on cybersecurity regulations. And it focuses on having the regulated entities have a robust data privacy program. Obviously, of course, you can see the problem right off the bat, which is it only applies to regulated entities of New York State DFS. And that's just one aspect. Granted, it's great for the regulated entities that are subject to the cybersecurity regulations, but that's about 30 or so licensees. We have many more who are outside the bounds of New York, not subject to Part 500. We have companies that have been in New York and engaged in virtual currency business activity in New York without the department's permission or approval. You have that problem. And it is very concerning for me and probably for you too, as the data diva, that we need a more comprehensive program on a national level, if nothing else, because as you read all of the problems that we are experiencing with fraud, with hacks, with ransomware, interestingly enough, I came across a data privacy report, and I could share that with you afterwards, from a San Francisco-based company called Aleo Network Foundation, that's spelled ALEO, where part of their motto is where cryptocurrency meets privacy, and they're really attempting to create a Web3 internet that really recognizes and respects privacy. And in this report that was issued earlier this month, there was a couple of revelations, including, and again, you always have to be mindful that when these are self-funded, you have to have a healthy dose of skepticism. But nonetheless, in the 2,000 people who were surveyed, almost 80% is concerned about data privacy. And even more startling, at least for me, was almost half felt that the tech companies really did not have control over how their own personal data is being used. And that, for me, in my personal opinion, is a really troubling way that we have to live in this world, particularly when we are seeing and reading or scrolling, if you have social media platforms like my younger kids do, that your information is going out there into the ether and it's being used and it's being manipulated and it could hurt you. What I find more interesting is in the same report that the younger generations, like the Gen Zs, they're concerned, but not as concerned as the baby boomers, which I thought was like, wow. So the baby boomers, 85% are very concerned compared to 68 from the Gen Zers. So that means we're losing, if you will, the education of our young people to explain to them why it's important to protect your privacy. I say this to my kids at all times. My mother used to say, you protect the most important gift you have is your name. And you must protect your name at all times. I take that in the real world and in the virtual world. And if information about me is being used to harm me, and there's no comprehensive government framework on the federal level, and definitely not in New York State, I think that's concerning.
I agree completely. As we're moving into a situation where so much of our life is digital, like you can, I think it would be hard for you to move through life without being connected in some way to a digital system. And people feel that their data is being maybe misused or easily companies are losing control over it. And it's dangerous.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I give you data to help me, but yeah, it's hurt me in some way.
When I first signed up for a social media platform, I don't know, 15 so years ago, at the time, you weren't thinking about data privacy. You were just thinking, oh, wow, great. This is a way of posting stuff and communicating with friends outside of emails. You never think of the long term consequences until it's, you don't want to say too late, because I don't think it's too late. But I think we're at a critical point where decisions and action needs to take place. Because as technology moves, and now we're shifting into AI, and AI has always been part of the conversation, but this new level of AI with Chat GPT, and finding out that the founder of Chat GPT is also the founder of WorldCoin, who wants to use biometric data to, if you want to use it to verify or to even earn coins, that's where you have to ask, hey, are we companies? What are you doing? And are you doing the job that you say you're doing? Because they can, that old adage, talk is cheap.
Yeah.
I think people at FTX probably wish they asked more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done audits? Are you verifying what you're saying through an independent audit trail, not just an audit trail? What are you doing to ensure my privacy? And getting back to that report a little bit, again, the report used the term cryptocurrency companies, and I'm not sure what that means. One of the things it listed that I really kind of was taken aback, where it was concluded that these companies are among the least trusted regarding data privacy and security, where 10% of the respondents either expressed a great deal of trust or 14% expressed a fair amount. So that's less than 25% of those who responded had some trust or high degree of trust in these companies. Conversely, that means 75% don't trust these companies to manage their data privacy. And why is that?
Right.
And I think we kind of know the why.
Yeah.
We only have a short period of time. If we sat here and delve into the why, I think it might be Christmas 2024, but by the time we finish every avenue of the whys that are known and unknown.
Right, right. Oh my goodness. Yeah. There's just so much swirling around. right now. So much technology. I'm always concerned when people think the technology is the answer to all problems, which I don't think that's true. Also, I know, just as you say, companies that want people to move into these digital realms, we have to solve the trust problem before people can truly feel like these things are a benefit to them and they can really help that adoption. What do you think?
I love that. I actually wrote it down, solve a trust problem. That is a good point. As I mentioned earlier, there's a reason why there are large segments of the population that are not banked. And that does not mean or does not include that they don't have access to a bank. There are banks here in New York, but there are people who refuse to open a bank account. So there is a trust issue. There's always a trust issue. And that delves into the history of fraud, the cynicisms of it, if that makes sense, where you see the collapse of a particular institution. You see the government bailing that institution out because, as we later learned, they're too big to fail. And then you have people complaining that no one was held responsible to their satisfaction. So that accentuates the trust or confirms, on the flip side, the lack of trust. So, how do you get people to trust you when, in their view, as I read the history and I did a deep dive into the financial crisis in 2008, which really spurred, if you will, the blockchain technology as we know it today. It was in large part in response to it. It's amazing how people forget that Bitcoin and the blockchain technology was released, at least the white papers, if you will, were released on October 31st, 2008. That was weeks away before Barack Obama was elected president of the United States, and weeks following the collapse of Lehman Brothers, which was a big shock to the financial institution to the point where it nearly collapsed our financial institution. At least that's my understanding from reading the history books. It's always a problem when you don't have trust in either your government, which it's getting more perilous now because you have so much information out there that you have to question. And if you don't know your history, if you're not someone who is savvy or you don't need a degree, but understand the history of this country, someone will tell you information that's completely untrue, but you believe it as true because you trust that person who's saying it. And you don't trust the government or the media who's telling you, no, that's not true. So you have this kind of breakdown in trust. So it's not just the banking or the financial institution that has a trust problem. I think the whole country has a trust problem. And we're going to have a bigger trust problem as we march towards November 2024 with the election.
Yeah. And with all the stuff happening, AI is really becoming very precarious. If it were the world, according to you, Deborah, and we did everything you said, what would be your wish for privacy or even virtual currency anywhere in the world? Whether that be regulation, human behavior, or technology.
Well, I think if I had my druthers for data privacy, it's all about having a comprehensive framework for Congress to sit down and create a law that protects its citizens and really have teeth, not just pass a law, but give it some power, if you will, to it. And have the state supplement. If it wants to add more protections to its citizens, then the state should be that supplementer. And the data privacy would encompass everything, including cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, because there is a lot of personal information in the blockchain that you want protected. If you go into the dark web, and I haven't, but I've been reading enough about it to know what's in there is pretty frightening. I'm scared to even ask someone to go into the dark web to see what information they have about me. I'm sure the dark web knows more about me than I do. But being, the president of the world or the leader of the world, as you asked, definitely have a robust framework around data privacy, particularly with young children. They are so vulnerable to these scammers, to naysayers, to misleading information. I recently heard that, and I did not even know you can do this, that a young teenager overdosed on fentanyl. The parents found him, unfortunately, OD'd and was not able to be recovered. This young boy was able to buy the fentanyl through one of those social media platforms for deliveries. I was stunned by this. They made an order, they paid for it, and the dealer shipped by mail the fentanyl or whatever the drug was that was laced rather with fentanyl to this young boy, and he passed away overnight after taking one pill. I'm trying not to go too far but you did give me this absolutist power, so I'm going for it. Protect children, but be mindful. But also have laws that really respect people's ability to innovate. That's how we've gotten to this point where we are so advanced technologically wise. It's because we have been really good at allowing folks to innovate. But we want to do so with the risk known. You want to do so with the risk mitigated. And you want to do so in protecting consumers. That was one of the areas that when I was at DFS, we were always focused on consumer protection. And that has always been the case since I've been at DFS, was consumer protection and ensuring that regardless of the customer type, they should walk into any one of the regulated entities and feel that they have a sense of trust with that company. And if they don't, they know who to turn to have their problem or their issue solved.
That's a great wish. That's a great wish. I second that.
Okay, good. Now we just need somebody to make me ruler of the world, and then we can all have happy lives.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. What's the best way for people to reach out to you for consulting opportunities?
Well, thank you, Debbie, for giving me the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners. If they wish to contact me, they could do so via my LinkedIn page, which is Debra Brookes. And Brookes is spelled Brookes. Don't forget that last E. And a little fun fact, the E in my last name is the common British spelling, whereas Brookes without the E is the common American spelling. So when you think of me, just think of me as a Brit and add the E.
I'll remember that. I won't forget that now. Oh, that's so funny. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Actually, the episode that you had mentioned where the person said that I was their daughter's aunt, Jeff Failing.
Yes.
He's the chief of staff at Moderna, their legal department. He's a dear friend of mine. So super sweet.
When I heard Auntie Debbie, I was like, yep, that's when you know you're in, when they call you Auntie.
That's right. Very, very true.
I love it. I love that. And, just listening to you engage with your guests, you just make us feel so warm and welcomed. And I felt nothing but warm feelings from you, and wanted to, again, thank you for allowing me to speak after 2 years of attempting to get this interview and this day to happen. So thank you.
Well, we're honored, and I'm so happy that you're on here because I think just being such a brilliant professional, someone who is really leading the charge in terms of merging technology and finance, especially, something that all of us care about and think about. So I think just having you on the show is just a great treat for our audience.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll get a chance to connect and collaborate in the future.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
All right. Talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.